Coming up on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto this week, prohibition has dropped $1.5 million into Massachusetts to shut down the billion-dollar adult use market in the Bay State. When and how will the industry respond? We talk with one of the nation's most respected pro-cannabis journalists who calls himself Reggie Reefer.
It also proved to us that, legalizing cannabis nationally won't destroy the fabric of society, right?
Plus, a new poll of Massachusetts residents who did sign that repeal ballot question initiative said they felt deceived by the process and would never have signed it if it was explained to them. And all quiet on the rescheduling front in Washington, D.C., but the Senate sends President Trump a bill that would continue to protect state medicinal markets. Maine is another New England state that is facing a shutdown ballot initiative, and this week, that state's Secretary of State says questionable signature gathering efforts are okay if they lie and misrepresent what they're doing. How is this possible? And it looks like adult use sales in Virginia could begin in that state by November of this year as the Senate continues working on a bill to present to new Governor Abigail Spanberger. She is ready to sign it when she gets it, which would make Virginia the 25th state to legalize adult use. Plus, Nebraska lawmakers are looking to overhaul that state's fledgling medical cannabis program before it even begins. We talk with Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana founder Krista Eggers, who's not too happy again with her governor.
And the governor is against this issue. He is supportive of medical cannabis, but definitely not supportive of medical cannabis as passed by the people.
All that and more on Cannabis Coast to Coast News with Alaina Pinto next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cannabis Coast to Coast News, WPCM-TV's weekly roundup of news on the battle to end cannabis prohibition. I'm Alaina Pinto. All is quiet on the federal reform front in Washington, D.C. The only thing making news in the nation's capital this week is a Senate bill to keep the federal government from disrupting the existing legal medical markets in states. So we turn to the states where there is some movement, and it looks like Virginia might now be the odds-on favorite to become the 25th legal adult use state in the United States, perhaps as soon as November of this year. Joe Parsons has been documenting that fight for a while now. Here's Joe.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Virginia's high-profile and historic gubernatorial election is complete as Abigail Spanberger was sworn in as Virginia's first lady governor. She's already expressed a willingness to move forward with adult retail use, as long as it adheres to strict and safe guidelines that include clear and responsible product labeling. And just as her administration has begun, Delegate Paul Kryzak has finalized and filed a completed and new cannabis bill to be sent to the House of Representatives. The new bill is in line to the revision that was released to the public last month at the last Joint Commission to oversee the transition of the Commonwealth into a retail market, in which he also chaired. There's already a steady showing of bipartisan support for many of the revisions to this year's bill, so hopefully it'll pass as quickly as last year's did. The new bill has been the hard work of many lawmakers who believe in the revenue potential and giving responsible adult use consumers a choice, and hopefully to reduce the dangerous legacy market's presence in the Commonwealth. And lastly, speaking of hardworking cannabis lawmakers, this year, the annual Virginia Normal Benefits and Awards Conference called the Commonwealth Green Gala in Richmond is honoring Senator Adam Ebbin. Senator Ebbin has been a driving force working since 2020 to get the legal framework for both medical and recreational cannabis use in the Commonwealth. He's also worked with fellow lawmakers like Paul Kryzak and Aaron Rouse, and even independent groups like Marijuana Justice to get safe and fair legislation passed. If not for his hard work and devotion, Virginia would not have been the very first Southern state to get wise and re-legalize. He deserves the honors. Well, that's going to do it for this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, Sponsored by 97.5 3WV in Charlottesville and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Until next time, I'm Joe Parsons. Stay lifted.
The current 40-plus states with medical programs and 24 legal adult use states in the U.S. didn't happen overnight. 13 of those states used a citizen-led effort to get voters to make changes to their state's cannabis laws at the ballot box. And now the prohibitionist group SAM, or Smart Approaches to Marijuana, are attempting to use that same tactic to undo existing adult use markets with a ballot initiative. Here in the Bay State of Massachusetts, the Office of Campaign and Political Finance Filings reported this week that SAM is going to drop $1.5 million in their campaign to shut down the adult use business in the Bay State. Curtis Emery has more in his Bay State Cannabis Report.
I'm Curtis Emery, a bud tender from Resonate in Worcester, Massachusetts, with the Bay State Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week, a development in the ongoing situation here in the state where a prohibitionist group has gotten a ballot question on this year's electoral cycle, which hopes to overturn adult use sales here in the state. That group had been taken in front of a state body, governing body here last week, and under suspicion of fraudulent signature gathering, the state had decided that no fraudulent activities could be proven. However, in a recent poll organized by the Committee to Protect Cannabis Regulations, it was discovered that about half of the signees who signed these petitions to overturn adult use sales felt misled or lied to or regret signing these, furthering the suspicions that foul play was indeed at hand, or at least those who signed weren't given the correct information or the whole picture just to what they were signing. Also in the news, the CCC decided this week that it's going to take firmer action in dealing with bodies here in the state under receivership. Because the cannabis industry is not federally legal, they cannot declare bankruptcy. Instead, the state has a specific program in place, receivership, where the state intervenes and helps get companies out of rocky areas. The state, or the CCC, decided that within the next 30 days, they're going to come back with a more rigid and functional set of guidelines for companies in receivership, hoping to help bring Massachusetts cannabis up out of uncertain financial times and back into a nice, strong market. I've been Curtis Emery with the Bay State Report, Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Using the ballot box is one of the most effective ways to make changes to laws in states. In the state of Maine, the same thing is happening. Both Maine and Massachusetts have received complaints about the professional signature gatherers' tactics to collect those signatures. Some say it's fraud, and others have witnessed intimidation and lies. This week, the Secretary of State in Maine, Shenna Bellows, said it's okay if those groups who are being paid by prohibitionists to gather those signatures lie about what the question is all about. She says they are protected by the First Amendment. Her exact words are, quote, "You have a right to lie under the First Amendment. So I do not have authority to take any enforcement action over the truth of what is being said," unquote. Cannabis Coast to Coast News executive producer Jimmy Young talked with a columnist for Cannabis.net this week about how 2026 is shaping up to be a battleground for the cannabis plant in America.
Thanks, Alaina. We are joined by a very special guest on Cannabis Coast to Coast News this week. His name is Reggie Reefer. Now, I watched and listened to this guy for a long time because I read Cannabis.net, and Kurt Dalton, who's the founder of that and kind of is the grand poobah of Cannabis.net, was my co-host on a podcast we did back in 2019, okay? And this gentleman is a writer, and he wrote an article this week that I was so excited about. I reached out to my friend Kurt. He introduced me to Reggie. I can call you Reggie.
Yeah, 100%.
Reggie Reefer, okay? And the article he wrote was 2026, the year of the great cannabis battles. So, Reggie, first of all, you did a great job. You touched on so many perfect points about the state of the industry right now, as far as I'm concerned. So I congratulate you on that. But if you could look at this, and it says, shaping up to be the battleground for the cannabis plant in America. How did you come up with this idea? And my goodness, it's quite a long piece too. How many words, if you don't
I
mind?
don't know. It's like close to 2,000, maybe
1,000
around
words.
about there.
Wow.
Usually they are around about there. I try to keep them short, but it
Oh
just
no.
they
You're
get
talking to a talk show host who knows how to fill time and
yeah,
is reprimanded for talking too much.
yeah,
So I get it.
yeah. It
Uh,
happens.
but congratulations. I think the biggest thing that I took away from this article was it really is a great example of how discombobulated the industry is right now because you've
Yeah,
got the legacy market that's been around for over 100 years. You've got the hemp CBD market that was deemed federally legal by our Congress of the United States back with the Farm Bill in 2018, where they opened up Pandora's box and they created this cottage industry that's underregulated, unregulated. And then, of course, now you have the people who are trying to do it the right way, the legal licensed group. And unfortunately, they're fighting against each other.
yeah,
There really has to be one plant. And I'm sure you know who Steve D'Angelo is, and
yeah,
I'm sure you know
100%.
who Andrew is, and you know that they're starting the One Plant Alliance, which I
Yeah.
think is tremendous. So, what do you think is the biggest reason right now for this discombobulation in the industry?
Well, as you mentioned, factions were created, and there was no national cohesiveness throughout all of the different, factions. So
Right.
you got the states, markets, they don't care about the other states as much unless it's a legalized state next to a non-legalized state, because that creates kind of like a minor, black market, gray market area. Makes it a little bit hard.
Hmm.
Then you've got the hemp dudes. They obviously was like, wow, we just scored the big one, so let's start selling this, psychoactive stuff. And to be fair, I smoked all of that, and it's not as psychoactive as just pure straight up flower. But it also proved to us that, legalizing cannabis nationally won't destroy the fabric of society, right? So that was on the other side that you could see, like, okay, you know what, they sold this at gas stations, and we didn't have people go crazy.
Right.
um
But we did get it into the hands of kids because of the stupidity of our Congress that didn't
yes,
put an age gate on it, because
yes,
that's the simplest thing to have controlled that. And also, let's also mention the fact that the FDA, after that farm bill, was supposed to be the regulatory body about how to
yes.
take CBD and put it into different products, and they did nothing
And
about
that's the problem, right? The problem here is we're treating cannabis and hemp as two separate things.
it.
So
Right.
that's where I see the one plant philosophy coming, and hey, it's not two things; it's the same plant. And under this banner, we should make rules for this whole plant. Um, and then also, really establish the fact that the whole Controlled Substance Act needs to be renegotiated. That thing is just it's one of the worst policies that has ever been birthed in the history of the United States.
That entire interview will be available on demand right now at the WPCM-TV.com website and released on our YouTube channel on Thursday. Another state that is battling over signature gathering is in Florida, where the Smart and Safe Florida group continues to gather signatures to get the adult use question back on the ballot for the fall. It's an uphill fight in the Sunshine State because their governor, Ron DeSantis, really doesn't want to open up cannabis sales to adults and keep his state focused on just their medical program, which is the most successful in the nation. A report on the latest data from the Florida Division of Elections shares that the Smart and Safe Florida group has submitted 714,888 signatures, with a goal of 880,000 submitted by February 1st, which is just 6 days away. That group still needs over 60% of the votes to make changes to the state constitution in Florida if those signatures can be collected in time. Next up, let's check in with Tina Tasaka with our Southwest Cannabis Report.
I'm Tina Tasaka on location with Iconic Representation and Cannabis X America, and this is the Southwest Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Former NBA star Lamar Odom was arrested for DUI in Las Vegas after police clocked him driving 106 miles per hour. Officers reported an overwhelming odor of marijuana, and Odom admitted he had smoked weed earlier that day. He failed field sobriety tests after swaying, losing balance, starting too soon, missing nose touch tests, and stopping mid-test. He was charged with DUI plus traffic violations for 41 plus miles per hour over the limit and improper lane use. Prime Leaf's Flower Hour with Tucson Doobie members is a members-only, just held its intimate cannabis tasting on January 22nd at Moroso Medical Center, featuring VARS Cannabis. Members get early access to new strains, insights from growers, curated tastings, munchies from Chiba Hut, and community connection. For this free for members, so check out Tucson Doobie. It's a new year and a brand new event. Come one, come all. The Marijuana Industry Trade Association, META, is hosting a special industry gathering you won't want to miss. It's Wednesday, January 28th from 6 to 9 p.m., and the location is Wasted Grain in Scottsdale, Arizona. Tickets are available online at meta.us/events. That's it for the Southwest highlights. I'm Tina Tasaka with Iconic Representation and Cannabis Ex America for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
There's another southern state that is starting to debate cannabis reform again. Surrounded by decriminalization states like Kentucky, Virginia, Missouri, and Arkansas is the volunteer state of Tennessee. A bipartisan group of legislators in that state house is talking about how, when, or why they should consider decriminalizing cannabis. This would be for a medical program that would drive tax revenue. 8-term state representative Antonio Parkinson, a former Marine and a Democrat, is pushing the Freedom to Farm Act in his state. There is a long way to go, but many state representatives from both political parties are giving credit to President Trump's executive order to remove cannabis from Schedule 1 of the CSA. Parkinson's bill would allow 15 plants to be grown at home. Anyone who knows anything about this complicated plant knows that could turn into quite a harvest if it is grown outdoor versus indoor. In fact, there are dozens of factors that impact the amount of cannabis that can be harvested from one plant, let alone 15 per adult per dwelling. Parkinson explains his thought process that he respects personal use and home grow, but his bill shows a complete misunderstanding of this complicated plant medicine. He emphasized that the plants could not be sold or removed from the property, and quote, "It is not to be sold, it is not to be bartered, it is not to be taken off the property. If it's taken off that property or if you're caught selling it, then you will be subject to all of the existing criminal marijuana laws. I don't want to know, and the government does not need to know." Unquote. Needless to say, there will probably be quite a few amendments to this bill if passed into law. It still does reflect how the president's executive order is already impacting the thought process of our elected officials. The next question is, what impact has it had on delaying the federal hemp ban? That's why we are fortunate to have Kerry Hinkle as our hemp reporter. Here's Kerry.
I'm Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp out of Houston, Texas, and I am back with another hemp report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This week we have a lot of news to cover as it relates to all things hemp policy in DC. First off, we started the week finding out that the continuing resolution that will be coming out by the end of the month to keep the government open will not include the extension from Congressman Jim Baird and Angie Craig. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes negotiations. We've heard reports of our biggest opponents willing to blow up the entire deal of funding the government over this inclusion of the extension in this very large funding package. So now the industry looks for other large spending packages that could move, or agriculture bills that could come together to support farming partners. There are going to be other vehicles to attach this extension language to, hopefully before the November 13th ban date kicks in. And then we also just got massive news today as Congressman Morgan Griffith, and he has been joined with a Texas counterpart, Democrat Mark Vesey, have finally released their long-awaited regulatory bill that would solve some of the much-needed issues around issues on 21 and up to sell the hemp products to adults only, labeling, registration, testing requirements. It's a 75-page bill almost, I think. So it's really well thought out, in depth, and yet it still is not the final answer. Currently, there is a 5 milligrams of THC per serving and 30 milligrams of THC per package. Those limits would default after 3 years if the FDA does not come up with their own limits. We understand, in speaking to the Congressman's office, that this is a starting point. It's a messaging bill. It's so that the extension can be heard in conjunction with regulatory solutions. But again, it is largely what the industry has been asking for, and I think a much needed step in the right direction. So now the industry, with both bills finally out, with co-sponsors on congress.gov, can point any and all of their members, both on the Senate and House, to direct them directly to staffers in these offices and garner support for these large, much needed pieces of legislation. So bad news on the extension, good news on the regulatory front, and all things move forward with hemp as always. Again, I'm Kerry Hinkle with Bayou City Hemp. We'll see you again next week.
That'll do it for the A Block this week, but when we come back, we'll have more state reports for you, and we will check in on Nebraska, where despite over 70% of voters supporting medical reform, that legislator continues to change the rules to fit their own agenda. We talk with Krista Eggers from Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana when Cannabis Coast to Coast continues after this.
Cannabis as passed by the people. Our ballot language is very clear. It was the whole plant.
Your cannabis business could be overpaying by hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal income taxes because of one simple assumption that you're making about your accountant. A dispensary owner in Colorado called me frustrated as hell. He'd been working with the same accountant for 3 years. His accountant said, "What's 471C?" Here's what the ignorance of that accountant was costing this business owner: $180,000 every single year for 3 years. 471C has been around since 2017. We're talking about an 8-year-old tax provision that many cannabis CPAs don't fully understand. 471C is one of the most complex and highly debated tax strategies in the cannabis industry. If you want to make sure you're not leaving any money on the table, I'm offering free 471C reviews this month. Link in the description.
Accounting Buds has grown into Buds Group, the same award-winning quality, now with more service offerings. Buds Group, your best buds in the biz.
Looking for PR that over-delivers on expectations? At Maverick Public Relations, they pair big agency experience with personalized attention. From launching award-winning brands to securing top-tier media hits, their data-driven communications team helps visionary leaders and entrepreneurs rise above the media noise. Maverick PR is responsive, collaborative, and relentless about results and ROI. Visit themaverickpr.com and make headlines together.
If you want to make history, if you want to be part of history, if you want to say you helped legalize marijuana in America, now is the time to join us.